Real-Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In Washington, Robert Kennedy resigns from the cabinet. In Detroit, President Johnson speaks at Cadillac Square. In New York, controversy over a school integration plan. Hell's Angels wreak havoc in Monterey, the Beatles invade Toronto, and Checkers is dead. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
When you have a headache, an aspirin tablet gives some relief, and with buffering, you get some. But an Anacin tablet gives you the relief strength of an aspirin tablet plus added relief strength plus the strength of another ingredient. Headache pains gone fast. So tension, depression, jittery nerves, and fatigue are gone fast. Remember, an Anacin tablet is strongest in the pain reliever doctors recommend most. Yes, strongest in the pain reliever doctors recommend most. Contains more of this pain reliever than any leading headache tablet.
On Thursday, Robert F. Kennedy closed the door on his cabinet career and prepared to run for the U.S. Senate from New York. His opponent will be Republican Senator Kenneth Keating. Before noon, Kennedy hand-delivered to President Johnson his resignation as Attorney General, the position to which he was appointed by his brother, President Kennedy, in 1961. Johnson said his regret was tempered by the fact that Kennedy would remain in public life, adding, quote, "You will soon be back in Washington, where I can again call upon your judgment and counsel," unquote. Later, at a news conference in the White House driveway, Kennedy was asked what he viewed as the most important achievement of his years at the Justice Department.
Well, I think that probably the area that I took greatest satisfaction from was, and I think was most important for the country, was the efforts that were made in the field of civil rights, not only by us, but by the federal government generally.
He was asked to answer the charge that he planned to use New York State as a stepping stone to the White House.
Well, I think that somebody there, and in my judgment, I keep reading that, and I never see any statement by him that he's willing to move out. So I think he's going to be there quite some period of time. I want to be elected senator from the state of New York, and I want to do a good job there. That's my objective.
At least for now, Kennedy will be replaced as Attorney General by his deputy, Nicholas Katzenbach, a 42-year-old former law professor. In Detroit this afternoon, President Johnson rejected a proposal made by his opponent, Republican Senator Barry Goldwater, that so-called tactical nuclear weapons be considered conventional weapons, of which NATO should have its own stock. Johnson said all atomic weapons must remain under presidential control. He made the statement before tens of thousands at an AFL-CIO Labor Day rally in Cadillac Square.
Make no mistake, there is no such thing as a conventional nuclear weapon. For 19 peril-filled years, no nation has loosed the atom against another. To do so now is a political decision of the highest order, and it would lead us down an uncertain path of blows and counter-blows whose outcome none may know. No president of the United States of America can divest himself of the responsibility for such a decision.
The timing and location of Johnson's speech were carefully chosen. The last two successful Democratic presidential campaigns, Harry Truman's in 1948 and John F. Kennedy's in 1960, both began at Cadillac Square on the same holiday. In Queens, New York this week, Mrs. Joan Adabo, 28-year-old president of the Jackson Heights branch of the Parents and Taxpayers Coordinating Council, denounced the New York Board of Education's plan to transfer children to schools outside their neighborhoods to achieve racial balance. Mrs. Adabo is the mother of two children affected by the board's pairing of two schools in Queens, PS 92 in Corona and PS 149 in Jackson Heights. Under the board student transfer plan, PS 92 will drop from 99% to 48% Negro, and PS 149 will drop from 87% to 75% white. In a televised interview, Mrs. Adabo declared that in a democracy, people must have free choice, and that the board was experimenting without the people's consent.
If any child has to walk past one public school in this city to get to another public school, it's an infringement upon his constitutional rights. I am not for trying to achieve racial balances in New York City. I am for integration, which now exists. I am for further integration, which I hope will come as time goes by on a voluntary basis. I'm sure it will come by the free choice and goodwill of the American people. If Mayor Wagner refuses to step in and stop this illegal act, there will be very few children involved in the pairing plan. They will be transferred out and into a private school.
The 3 children of Mrs. Wilma France, a Negro resident of Queens, will also have to walk extra steps this fall to experience integration. Mrs. France, president of the Parents Association of PS 92, so in effect, the opposite number to Mrs. Adabo, expressed support for the board's plan.
I think that our children and the children of Jackson Heights will benefit greatly from the smaller class size, from the additional services of all of the specialists. And I think most important of all, I think they will benefit from learning to live and study and play with children of all different backgrounds. I feel that if the pairing goes through, and if we do get the type of teachers who know what they're doing, who can reach each child at his own level and help him and give him the help that he needs, I think that there will be no problem at all.
This week, Jacob Landers, the board's head of integration planning, made his own televised statement on the controversy.
Ever since the Supreme Court decision of 1954, it has been the policy of the Board of Education to secure greater integration in the schools as quickly as practicable. The plans proposed for September 64 are intended to reduce further the gap between policy and practice. They are limited, they are practicable, and they represent sound education for all the pupils involved. The schools alone cannot bring about a fully integrated society, but with these present plans, we are trying to discharge our responsibility to American democracy. We shall not be deterred from this effort.
This afternoon, 2 parents' groups, Mrs. Adabo's and the Joint Council for Better Education, announced plans for a general boycott of city schools on the first 2 days of this fall's term, September 14th and 15th. The announcement was received with some relief by the Board of Education, as earlier, the 2 groups had threatened to boycott the schools for an indefinite period. Prolonged withdrawal of students would cut deeply into the millions of dollars per week that city schools receive in state aid, which is based on attendance. I'll have more news for you after this message.
Let's look at the record of Lyndon Johnson. He was Bobby Baker's best friend. LBJ once said, "Bobby Baker is my strong right arm, the dark shadow of voting fraud such as the infamous Box 13. Billy Sol Estes and his connections in high places. A television monopoly forced on the people of Austin. A $14 million personal fortune gained on an average government salary of $14,000 a year. Honestly, it just doesn't add up."
Gee, Dad, is all that true?
Yes, son, every bit of it.
Will you and Mother vote for a man like that?
We won't. We can't, for your sake.
Put a man of honesty, integrity, and strength in the White House. Vote for Barry Goldwater. In your heart, you know he's right.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
In Monterey County, California today, angry officials warned outlaw motorcyclists who invaded Bay towns this weekend not to come back. Roughly 300 members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club were escorted out of the county after 4 Angels were jailed as suspects in the gang rape of 2 teenage girls early Sunday morning on a remote beach 10 miles north of Monterey. One girl, 14, was assaulted 20 times. The other, a 15-year-old Negro, was assaulted 8 times. This afternoon, Monterey Mayor George Clemens stated, quote, "These are not kids. They are old enough to know better. They're a crummy-looking lot with their beards and unwashed appearance. We don't want them back," unquote. This evening, it was reported that California law enforcement agencies were set to begin a major top-level investigation of the activities of the Hells Angels on the orders of State Attorney General Thomas Lynch. In Toronto today, there was chaos outside Maple Leaf Gardens after the Beatles' afternoon performance, as a crowd of 2,000 teenagers stampeded from entrance to entrance to catch a glimpse of their idols. But the harassed police fooled them all. They faked a departure from the arena with a decoy fleet of limousines, while the 4 lads from Liverpool sped safely out of the back entrance in a police van. 2 hours before the Beatles left their downtown hotel, drummer Ringo Starr caused a near riot by appearing at a window. Thousands of fans screamed, crashed through a police line, and streaked for the hotel entrance. Several teenagers were injured, either crushed in the crowds or suffering fainting spells. This afternoon, a reporter asked John Lennon if he and the other Beatles were prisoners of their own success, as they've been unable to explore the cities they've visited during their recent string of performances.
Only when we're on tour. When we're not working, nobody knows where we are half the time.
You don't go anywhere? You don't do anything?
Well, we've come here to work, haven't we? We're on tour. When the tour's over, we've got 2 weeks off, and we can go out and do what we like.
How do you feel about this personally? I mean, if I was in London, England, or if I was in Europe someplace, I'd like to go out and see something. I mean, you chaps will get a chance to see anything.
If you were there to work, you wouldn't be... We came over here to do a tour and work. We'd not come here to sightsee or see buildings or the local.
Well, what about this press conference right now? Is this sheer work? I mean, there's no pleasure involved.
We have a laugh with its pleasure.
The Beatles' next stop is Montreal, where they will give 2 shows at the Forum before departing for Jacksonville, Florida. Checkers, Richard Nixon's famous dog, is dead. The black and white Cocker Spaniel, who gained national attention in a speech by Nixon in 1952, was 12 years old. She was under a veterinarian's care when she died yesterday. A Nixon aide said the family regarded Checkers as, quote, the perfect family dog. In fact, a member of the family, unquote. Nixon made the famous speech on September 23, 1952, when he was campaigning as Dwight D. Eisenhower's running mate against Illinois Governor Adlai Stevenson. In the speech, Nixon responded to charges that he had improperly received over $18,000 from supporters. After noting that Stevenson had inherited a fortune, Nixon stressed his modest means, detailing his finances and telling of the home his family had bought, of his wife's quote-unquote respectable Republican cloth coat, and of Checkers.
One other thing I probably should tell you, because if I don't, they'll probably be saying this about me too. We did get something, a gift, after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our 2 youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it.
The speech, mocked by some, prompted an outpouring of public support for Nixon. He was thus retained by Eisenhower on the ticket, which scored a landslide victory over Stevenson 6 weeks later. On Thursday, U.S. military officials said at least 2 Japanese soldiers from World War II were still hiding out in the jungle 20 years after Guam's capture by American forces in the summer of 1944. Last week, a construction worker on the island saw the pair, who were bearded and bedraggled. He said one pointed a rifle at him and pulled the trigger, but no bullet was fired. Guam Police Captain Jose Quintanilla said he believed that the 2 men were holed up somewhere in the northeastern jungle, where the Japanese made their last stand. Sports, right after this.
On October 24th, 1963, Barry Goldwater said of the nuclear bomb, merely another weapon. Merely another weapon. Vote for President Johnson. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
The Yankees emerged from Labor Day weekend with their traveling plans scrambled, and their position in the American League race improved. At 11 o'clock this morning, in the first game of a scheduled doubleheader played at Minnesota's Metropolitan Stadium, the Bombers beat the Twins in 11 innings, 5-4. As soon as the 3.5-hour contest ended, the rain, which had stopped only at game time, resumed and continued for the rest of the day. At 8:05 this evening, the second game was rescheduled for tomorrow night, and this caused confusion and griping. Ball players do not like playing night games on a getaway day, when they must move on to another city. The Yankees figured that if they flew to Detroit after playing tomorrow night, they wouldn't reach their hotel there until Wednesday at 4 a.m. They are scheduled to play the Tigers Wednesday night and Thursday afternoon. Several Yankee players expressed the view that Twins owner Calvin Griffith pushed tomorrow's game to the evening to boost beer sales. Griffith can't sell beer in Minneapolis tomorrow until 8 p.m. because it's primary day. But there was some good news today as well, as the Yankees learned that the second-place White Sox had lost their doubleheader and the first-place Orioles had split. This still left the Bombers in third place, but just a game and a half out of first, whereas 2 weeks ago, they were 5 games out. In the National League, the Phillies, who split with the Dodgers today at Connie Mack Stadium, maintained their hold on first place, leading by 6.5 games 3 clubs currently tied for second: the Reds, Cardinals, and Giants. And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Monday, September 7th, 1964. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.